What is good, Internet? We're back with another episode of Nothing But Netflix on the Underdog Podcast Network. I want to welcome one of my oldest friends, Fotis, joining us today for the episode. Fotis, how we doing?
What's going on, Corey? Thank you for having me, man. This is pretty exciting. I'm glad to be talking some hoops today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Fotis and I grew up playing basketball together since we were in middle school. We went to sleepaway camps, dorming together at Villanova. A lot of fun basketball memories. This is gonna be a little bit different of an episode from what we normally do, because this is gonna be the first episode that we're actually doing a documentary, rather than a film. And I think that to start out the first documentary on the pod, we had to keep it very New York, and it is on Stephon Marbury. So there is a documentary on Netflix called A Kid From Coney Island, about Stephon Marbury, about how he grew up, and how he ended up. And I had never watched it. It was something that came across, my recommended list on Netflix, and then Fotis and I, we worked together teaching at a high school, and he was like, you know what, I would love to do it on this doc, and here we are. The rest is history.
Dude, as soon as I brought it up, you're like, yo, we're gonna do it for Nothing But Netflix. So, like, that's the one, man. We've got to cover that.
Yeah, man. Stephon Marbury is a really interesting person. Especially, as a New Yorker. I feel like with a lot of New York athletes, when you're from New York, there's a little bit more of an attachment than if, you're somebody from, say, Texas who was watching Marbury. His life is complicated. And, we're going to get into why it was complicated, and maybe if it was a different era, if he would have had a different career. But, like most documentaries, they start at the beginning, and you see him with his family, and he's there's interviews with his friends, and it talks about how he grew up in a basketball family with a bunch of his brothers coming before him. I think he had 2 or 3 brothers who played Division I ball before him, and they said that he took elements from each one of their games. You have some older brothers.
Oh yeah.
Did you kind of do the same thing, like having older brothers? Because I'm the oldest in my family. What kind of advantage is there growing up, with having older brothers and playing?
Listen, man, my 2 brothers, just for the record, they're both 6'2", and for those of you who are watching or listening, I'm 5'7", with shoes on, with basketball sneakers. I might be pushing 5'8", with some nice high tops.
Yeah. But
and growing up, the height difference, the discrepancy is even worse because they're growing at such a more rapid pace. And I'm 100 pounds, I'm 70 pounds, and I'm trying to play the game with giants, essentially. And it was nice. All the things that they say is true. The same thing with, not that I'm comparing myself to Jordan or Marbury, but like you said, when you have older brothers and they're so much bigger than you, they're just going to bully you on the court. So, and Marbury had 5 older brothers or 4?
He's got a lot of family. He had a lot of family.
He got a lot of, and they were apparently like pretty good ball players who they themselves had a shot at the league, or their family was saying. I think the sister and the mom were saying that really Stephon wasn't the one who was supposed to go pro. Like, he wasn't the, they had high hopes for all the other brothers. So it was interesting to see how he kind of just watched that, and like you said, he picked up the skills, and they said he grabbed the jumper from one of them, and he grabbed the ball handling from the other, and then the work ethic from the from the 3rd or 4th brother or whatever. And it's definitely fascinating, man.
Yeah, it's funny, like, you forever in whatever sport we've always played, and everybody says it, anybody who's played against you, you're the most tenacious, like, defender. You always are given 100%. You never take any possessions off. Mm-hmm. And, your older brother kind of plays like that too. And then, like you said, you were kind of an underdog because you were so much smaller than your 2 brothers. So, that height, did that help develop that kind of tenacity?
Oh hell yeah, man! I mean, listen. If you love the game, if you're interested in the game, and those are the guys that you're playing with, on a regular basis, like these are the guys that you're getting reps in. You have to find a way, right? And you can't do it, from skill because you're less experienced, you're younger, and you can't do it from size because you're physically smaller, obviously. So you have to work your ass off. You have to, whatever it takes, you have to find a way to get something, to find some kind of competitive edge. And I guess that's where my hustle came in. I don't know. I mean, obviously, you love the game. I love the game. You have to find something. You have to find your niche.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that probably helps. I mean, Steph is 6'2", Stephon Marbury, so it's not like he's tiny by regular human standards, but
right. Big to us, but small to the basketball world.
But yes, tiny in the basketball world. And then he grew up in Coney Island, in a tiny apartment in a housing project. And, everyone always says you're not supposed to make it from there. And there's always so much talent that does. And there are so many things that go into making it. And, one of the things that I thought was interesting was that, his dad never stopped him from dreaming, because I think that when you grow up like that, it's easy to not have dreams because there are so many people who didn't make it out. Right. And to have somebody supporting you, his dad said, we wouldn't be in the sky if the Wright brothers didn't dream.
Right.
Which I thought was a really fun little quote. And he put that faith and that, into Steph, that he could make it out. And, there's another documentary that I'm going to do on the show that was executive produced by Dwayne Wade and my guy, Dan Ponman, who is an NBA agent. It's called Shot in the Dark. And it's about a high school team in the inner city of Chicago. And its main focus is on this one kid who, kind of has a shot to make it to college. And his friend, he actually had college offers. He ended up getting in trouble and got all his offers taken away. And then by the end of it, he's dealing with all of these things pushing and pulling him from all these directions outside of basketball, just growing up in this community from, this kid isn't able to go to certain streets because it's gang territory. And, growing up in situations like that, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that some people have a harder path because there are other outside influences. And, this Stephon Marbury's journey was kind of documented in what is in my opinion, is the best basketball movie ever. And He Got Game, where Ray Allen actually plays him as a kid who went to Lincoln High School from Coney Island. And, they talk about the invisible enemy, and there's a scene in He Got Game, which is one I'm trying to save because it is my favorite, where, Ray Allen's driving in a car with, kind of like the neighborhood. I believe he was like a drug dealer or whatever. He's in this fancy car and he's telling him all these things. And, when you are somebody like Stephon Marbury, someone like Jesus Shuttlesworth, and you're growing up, you're now a little bit famous. You're on ESPN, especially nowadays. The kids are on, Ball is Life and House of Highlights when they're 14 years old.
Yeah, freshmen in high school, they're getting attention. Or even the kids who have Instagrams, or they're putting their highlight videos from 7th and 8th grade. They're on the map. And they have attention, and then they have expectations. Yeah, man, it's
and there's so many people pulling at you because of that, because people always want to, latch on when you have a little bit of juice. And, Stephon Marbury's story is no different. They said that, there was a ton of people like that, especially when he started getting national, attention at the high school scene. And what was funny is that they actually said that, the drug dealers looked out for him.
Yeah.
In the community.
They protected the courts. Yeah.
They
knew. Interesting.
They knew that he had a chance to make it out. And there's a lot of fun cameos in this movie, and like Cameron from Dipset, he's saying like, we knew that this kid had it. We need to protect him, and if you're not going to be, a baller or a rapper, it's hard to make it out and get out of this life. So, it's interesting that, he had a lot of people pulling for him throughout his career.
Yeah, there's a bit in that sequence in the documentary where they're talking about basically all the issues of the neighborhood and the gang related stuff. And I'm sure you remember when I forget who said it, but they said, "Listen, something's about to go down." And whenever that was about to go down, we're like, "Steph, get your ball and go home." Yeah. Like you said, everybody knew that he had a shot. But even still, I think we take that for granted as fans, because we see the product. We see when the guys who make it to the league. I know you cover a lot of guys in the draft and stuff, college guys, but when you're talking about high school players and kids who are balling on in the street or at the park, how many of those guys, didn't make it? How many, especially at 6'2", like you said, that's not a huge player. That's not a shoe-in for a first draft pick, especially, to go, number 4, to go to Georgia Tech and, to get heavy minutes. So there's no guarantee, especially, you see the story of his brothers. How easy would it have been for Marbury to see, the path that his brothers went, not that they went astray or anything, but they didn't go to the league.
Yeah.
They just didn't cut it. They couldn't cut it out. And they had the same upbringing. They came from the same neighborhood. So for him to have that belief and for the neighborhood to have that belief in him and for people to protect him and for his dad to, push him and to keep striving, you see that on the draft day footage when they cut away to his dad and he just has tears running down his eyes. And that's powerful stuff, man.
That scene was really powerful because you see how much sacrifice it's not an individual effort. A lot, it's a family effort to get to that spot and a community effort. And I mean, even for people like us who played high school basketball and then we went and we coached high school basketball, there's a lot of sacrifice from a lot of people. Early Saturday morning practices, our parents had to drive us. Your family let us play basketball outside of your house for hours at a time, after school. It's it's not easy for somebody to make it by themselves. You need more than just one person. And you saw the culmination of that, like on draft night, where everybody just knows how hard of a journey it is to make it to that moment.
Sure. Yeah. And that was kind of neat where, for us, obviously, it was us, a few of us, but for Marbury, for guys of that talent, I mean, he's playing with Garnett and, he had a couple other, really like, Felipe Lopez, we're boys, but we're playing on the court. Like, it's just another, they're in another stratosphere. So I can't even imagine what that world is like and how many hours they're putting into the game,
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you mentioned Felipe Lopez and like Garnett, who, Felipe Lopez, they mentioned they kind of had like a rivalry. And Felipe Lopez, he's kind of forgotten how big he was. Like, he had hype that some of these like high school kids have now without the internet.
Right.
Like, especially in New York, he went to St. John's. My whole family were huge St. John's fans. So, I remember hearing about Felipe Lopez forever. And, he had such high expectations. And I think nowadays it'd probably be able to temper some of them because you have so much more game film to watch. And you can kind of get a better read on the talent. But they talked about Felipe Lopez like he was going to be a superstar player. And, to have a guy like Felipe Lopez, have a guy like Stephon Marbury, and then, he played with God Shamgod, all of these guys he grew up with all at the same time.
Rafe.
For all, Skip to My Lou. I mean, all of these guys, that's kind of a crazy way to grow up because you think about the odds of making it to the league, how small they are. And then to have a bunch of those guys you grow up with make it with you is kind of special.
Sure. Yeah.
And then his draft class.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. We'll get there in a second, if you don't mind. I just wanted to stick on Felipe Lopez really quickly. I looked him up just to see how many years he was in the league because I knew it wasn't many.
Yeah,
but I think he was in for like four or 5 years, and he flamed out really quickly. And I wonder. And one of the questions that I had was, and the same thing for Marbury. You see how the speculation and the media and the buzz can get to a player, right? It can really screw somebody up psychologically, emotionally. And I wonder a lot of the times, is it just the talent? Is it like you said about measuring your expectations for someone like Felipe Lopez, or having a better read on his game film and stuff? I wonder if some of it's psychological. Maybe you get to that point, you achieve what you've been striving for so many years, and then you realize you're like, wow, everybody here is really, really good. And a lot of these people are better than I am, and how am I ever, you get that imposter syndrome, and you never take that next leap once you get to the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an amazing point, because you're used to being the man at the lower levels, and it comes easy. A lot of times with these guys, they're so much bigger that, that's why it comes easy. Then you start making it to the higher levels. Like even Felipe Lopez at St. John's. I remember, I didn't look it up for this podcast, but I was looking him up for some other reason. Maybe it was just general curiosity. But he had, I think, a good first freshman season, and then he kind of flamed. His seasons tailed off as he continued, and I think he played all 4 years at St. John's, and he was like a middling kind of college player. Like he had some good years in the Big East, but he wasn't like this great player. So it's not really shocking that he even only made it 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, in the league. But a guy like Marbury, who did kind of have all of the talent in the world and did have a long NBA career, even with that, you see how hard it is to win and make it and not, lose yourself in all of the challenges that come with being a professional athlete.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful for, I guess, the time that we're living in, because we get to see these documentaries being made. Even the Jordan documentary, that whole series.
Yeah.
You get to lift the veil a little bit on the psychological and emotional journey of these, and then you realize of these players, and you realize they're human beings. Like we go on emotional roller coasters in a, maybe in a I guess in an adult league, we might have some, so these guys, the stakes are so much higher. And, like we were saying earlier, their whole community is riding on the success of this one guy. And what are they, 20, 21 years old, 22 years old? Not to mention all the changes that are happening in their lives financially, geographically. I mean, probably dealing with lots of women, also, so to take that all into account and to see what these guys go through, and then to expect them, they have to be taking their team to the playoffs, and then they have to get a championship. Otherwise, there's going to be scrutiny. There's going to be criticism on this guy. And that could be tough.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And, you mentioned the geographic location, and they talk about how, like, one of the things that Marbury didn't like about Minnesota was how cold it was. There's nothing to do. It's so cold.
Yeah. And there was that shot of him we're just walking down in an N1 hoodie. He just looked miserable.
And I want to talk about N1 in a minute. But you look at the situation that he gets drafted into, going to Minnesota with Kevin Garnett, who's one of his friends, like his very good friends. He talks about how financial decisions screw you up. He sees Garnett get this extension. The rules change, and he can't get as much money. And now, there's all of that going into it. And, he kind of wants out. Maybe for reasons that he probably looks back and, if you were like, hey, how do we redo this career and make it better? You'd probably be like, oh, let's try to keep him with Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, I think if he looks back, I think maybe he sticks it out in Minnesota a little bit longer. If he looks back and he says, all right, well, if I'm going to bounce around from New Jersey and Phoenix and New York and win 25% of my games for the next decade, or I could be in Minnesota in the cold. Yeah, it's cold. It really sucks here, but maybe I can get used to this, and maybe we can make a run at a ship for a few years.
Yeah. I mean,
probably he's going to stick it. What did Stephen A say? He's like, listen, you're with your boy. He's like, it's cold. We get it. He's like, grab a coat.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's cold in New York and New Jersey, too, in the winter. But, there's obviously a difference when you're home. But, man, growing up, I remember, like, how cool Steph and Kevin Garnett were together. Like, getting their basketball cards and, Stephon Marbury had the hair with the part in the middle. They were just for kids our age. I really gravitated towards them, and it's definitely a big what if basketball wise. I think for both players. Obviously, Garnett's career turned out amazing. He won a championship. He's a winner, MVP. But he had so many tough years in Minnesota himself, where he was looking for that co-star. And you wonder that, like, if they just figured it out, stuck it out, would they be able to build something around both of them? It's,
I think there's no way that they're not a perennial playoff team if both of those guys, because their first 2 years there, it was Marbury's first and second year and Garnett's second and third year, right?
Yeah.
And so Garnett's he's at a high school. He's 19 years old when Marbury shows up.
Yeah.
And then 19 and then 20 or 21 around there. Yeah. And Marbury's 20 years old. So, and you have this team who's going 500 in the West.
Mm.
That's pretty good. Like, you guys are hanging as basically you're still boys. By the time you're 22 and Garnett's 21, 23 and 22, you guys are going to be a top 4 seed, top 5 seed in the West. And again, but I think the nice part about the documentary was, like, you get to see the emotional and the psychological distress that, I know they kind of glossed over it, but he obviously wasn't in a good place and he pushed himself out of there quick.
Yeah. We could talk about it now because there was a lot of times that he wasn't in a good place. We'll get into his Knicks tenure in a little bit, but he obviously had a lot of stuff going on there too. And I wonder, yesterday, Kevin Love released, his second big article on the Players Tribune about mental health. DeMar DeRozan I think he came out first and kind of talked about the, dealing with mental health issues. And now it's so much more of an accepted thing that everybody has stuff that they go through. And that depression and anxiety, like, even NBA players and wealthy people go through it. And it's not a knock on your manhood if you're dealing with anxiety. And, I think back then it wasn't like that in the least bit. This is, like, really new, and it's 2020 and it's still really new. And, I think that the media they could be vicious now as well, but, there's no empathy there when they saw athletes going through stuff. They was just capitalizing and talking about.
Oh, you get crushed. Yeah. I think there's a little bit more compassion now. I don't know. I think it's a double-edged. I think it's gotten better. Like you said, it's better and worse.
Yeah.
Because, dude, if you hop on Twitter after the Paul George, he went like 3 for 16 in one of those games. One of their games with Denver. You hop on Twitter after, and it's brutal, man. And that's not even the media. That's just fans ripping into the guy. So, I don't know that it's all that much better. In some ways, it might be worse, actually, just because it feels like more of a pile-on. But you're right. I think the stigma of, not like mental disorder, but just anxiety and just general, human issues. I think on a bigger scale, there's a little more compassion there.
Yeah, we still have ways to go. We definitely do. Sure. And, outside of just Twitter, like, you watch First Take or, Skip Bayless's show or whatever, and they'll be the first to hammer you for a bad performance. Even Paul George came out in the bubble saying that he was dealing with like anxiety and stuff because, you know, they're in this situation where they don't get to see their friends and family, and, you know, that's been affecting him. And then, you know, everybody's killing him 6 days later. Even prior, they were like, "Oh man, Paul George is dealing with this. You know, prayers up. You know, through it."
Short-term memory, man.
Like it's better and worse, and there's a long ways to go. But you know, it's very clear that Stephon Marbury had a lot of that to deal with. And you know, when you're a professional athlete and you're moving city to city, you don't get to bring the close people with you necessarily, and it's not a normal job. You know. You don't get to choose where you live a lot of times. You know, you might enter free agency if you're a good player, really maybe twice, you know, and the first time you're restricted, so you don't really get a choice. Even if you sign somewhere else, your team can just match it if they want. You know, you kind of, it's not like you get to just apply for a job and be, you know, in Minnesota and go work there. And if you don't like it, you can move back. You're stuck there. And, you know, if you have to be a very good player to request a trade and actually have it granted and have, you know, be sent somewhere where you want.
And it's not, you know, people will say, well, that's what the money is for. And I mean, the guy gets millions of dollars, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you watch the end of the documentary, he talks about 3/4 of the way, and he talks about, you know, he didn't want to be here anymore, meaning he didn't want to be on the planet anymore. You know, I think his wife at the time, or is it still his wife? Is he still married?
I don't know. It was unclear because it seemed like he was alone in China, but
But so whoever the mother of his children, you know, someone close to him, she says, you know, I forget. Oh yeah, he said he didn't want to be here anymore. You know, he was, you know, he basically wanted to kill himself. You know, and it doesn't matter. The money doesn't matter. I mean, obviously it's great. It's a great compensation for what you do. You're playing basketball, but it's not going to take away whatever stress that you have, or if you're feeling that weight, you know, from your community, from your city, from, you know, the closest people to you, or even the team that you thought you were a part of, you know, there's nothing that's going to take that away.
No doubt. We mentioned when he was walking in the cold that he was wearing a big N1 hoodie. And, you know, now I think that like if you're a younger person listening to this, you look at N1 as like this Walmart brand that, you know, is selling cheap $10, $15 shoes in Walmart for, you know, whatever. But when we were in high school or middle school and N1 first came out, I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world.
It was, because it was.
You know,
they had the mixtapes coming out too. That's why, in conjunction with the brand, they had this whole marketing campaign that was, dude, it was street ball, and the logo is literally like a dude like with an Allen Iverson crossover.
And you know, they like their clothes. Like I remember, I wanted like the tearaway pants so bad, and then their t-shirts, they had like trash talk like t-shirts that you would do like as you were playing street ball. You know, outside of just Iverson, you had Vince Carter wearing the shoes. You know, there was a very specific pair that were like, you know, one color on the inside and white or black on the outside. And you know, it's crazy. I think Fred VanVleet has been wearing N1s recently.
Really?
Yeah.
He's still rocking them. Wow. Okay.
When I was in grad school, I had to do a paper, and N1 was actually mentioned in it, and it was a marketing campaign. It was weird because they still have the section of the company that is kind of Walmart, but then they also are trying to rebrand the company again to be cool on a grassroots level, where they're going to be like sponsoring AAU tournaments, and they're trying to rebuild the brand and make it cool again. And actually have like real, like, you know, $80, $100 shoes. So they're trying to revive it, I think, a little bit. But, you know, the history of it, there's a good history for them to tap into it, you know, if they want to.
When it first came on the map, man, it was huge. Yeah. And Marbury had a role in that, of course. But it was tapping into the culture of the league at the time too. I think, you know, it was kind of like the attitude era of the NBA.
Yeah.
Like it was cool. It was hip. It was on the heels of like hip hop really like hitting its peak, or like right after the peak of hip hop, and it was just riding that wave. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe you have some information. Like, where did they kind of go? Where did they kind of hit a bump? And like Nike and Reebok and Adidas started kind of really take back the market share in that area.
I honestly, from what I remember, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they just sold the company.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they just, they sold it to, whatever conglomerate Walmart is under, and
wow.
They kind of cashed out, and then I think that maybe they tried, kind of buying it back, but they have the deal with Walmart to where Walmart kind of gets to keep part of it, and then they're trying to. I'm pretty sure it was something like that. I know, I did this project like 3 years ago. And I'm sure a lot has changed since then, but I feel I'm pretty sure they sold it. But yeah, it has a cool history, and like you said, the whole hip hop aspect and with the mixtapes was huge. And I always say, and I kind of wanted to, I've always wanted to write a book and about this subject, about guys who have changed the game in some way. So you look at Dirk and. Now all big men shoot threes because Dirk came in and was a 3-point shooter. Steve Nash changed the game in the way that everybody plays fast now. You go into a high school gym or an LA Fitness or a street ball court, and kids are launching 30-foot threes because of Stephen Curry. But I always say that the guy who had an impact on the game of basketball outside of Michael Jordan, the guy who impacted it the most was Allen Iverson. And I don't think he gets credit because his fingerprints are all over the league right now. From everybody has tattoos. Iverson made that, kind of made that popular. Iverson was the guy, he came in with braids. Everybody started getting braids after Iverson, and now they're kind of coming back around. Armbands. The arm sleeve, that was Iverson was the first guy to do that, and now
I've never seen that before.
And everybody does it now. The merging of hip hop and basketball was like embodied by Allen Iverson, and like he was in rap videos, and like he was crossing over into other areas of media, and he was really misunderstood. I mean, David Stern had to implement a dress code, because of the quote unquote image of the league, because it was getting so hip hop, and people are, if we've learned anything over the last few years, people are a little bit racist, even if they don't. And that was that was another example of it. But I look at just from a cultural impact perspective, I've always felt like Iverson made such an incredible impact that has lasted so long. I mean, now you look at guys in fashion and stuff, and Russell Westbrook walking down the hallway, and it's a photo shoot in the tunnel now. And
I don't know what's going on now. I don't know if that's an extension of Iverson or what. I think, I'm not a huge fan of the crazy art pieces that guys wear walking into the game. If anything, I just think it's kind of a distraction to the team. If you're going in and I don't know. I mean, I'm not against like wearing whatever you want, but I think a lot of the guys do it intentionally to get some kind of buzz about them. Or
well, yeah, no doubt. I mean, JJ Redick,
fine. It's
JJ Redick said it. He said that some guys they're more concerned with getting on league fits than they are with the game at night.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. And it could definitely be a distraction. I mean, I feel like some of the stuff that like Kyle Kuzma wears, like, he's not ready to wear. Like you got to be, you have to be consistently better than that. I went golfing last week, and there was a couple of guys in front of us that I thought were going to be amazing because they were decked to the nines in the best golf clothes and shoes and hats. And then they sucked. And I was like, you guys can't wear that stuff. You're not good enough. So there's definitely guys like that. But I feel like all of these people love dressing up because it stemmed from they weren't able to with the dress code. And now you add social media into it and, the evolution. It's all an evolution of stemming kind of from that. But, Iverson and Marbury was also a big, kind of area of discussion leading up to the draft. I mean, I think most people had Iverson ahead of him, but, they were both they shared a lot of similarities with, the tattoos, the quick kind of score first point guard, the crossovers, the flashy play. Both players, the young version of themselves, were both really athletic. So
Iverson, where is Iverson from? I know he's not from New York.
Virginia.
I mean, he's not from New York, but he plays like he's from New York. Like, let's be honest.
He does.
He's got New York attitude. Like, he could have – I mean, he played in Philly, but he could have easily played, as a Knick. He
for sure.
has that swagger. I mean, he's AI. And Marbury, too. I agree. I think they're comparable in that regard. They just have that unshakable attitude. And dude, even in AI's career, I think it a couple times it hit him. He got into a little bit of trouble, or when I think he got traded to Denver and stuff, and people were wondering if he could mesh or if he could get along with another star or whatever. Or in Philly when he was taking the blame for loss. But in any case, he took them to a finals appearance.
Yep.
And they were in the playoffs for a couple of years, and there wasn't much around him other than, Dikembe Mutombo and Aaron McKee,
Eric Snow.
Back to Marbury, man. When they came into the league, Marbury was the 4th pick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that draft class, just to even be top 5 in that draft class, it's insane. That's easily the best draft class ever, right?
It's gotta be. I mean, you got Steve Nash, Marcus Camby, Jermaine O'Neal, Kobe, Terry Kittles, Ray Allen, Sharif Abdul-Rahim, Antoine Walker,
Ilgauskas.
I mean, you could go on, and all of those guys were legit NBA players.
Many of them all-stars too.
All-stars, Hall of Famers, MVPs. Yeah. Unbelievable draft class, and like you said, to go top 5. And I mean, he had a complicated career, but talent-wise, he lived up to the talent part of it. You could say what you want, but he was an automatic 20-8 every night.
Yeah, I think that's what he finished his career average on too, right?
Yeah, I have to double check, but that was his thing. He was 20-8. Was, who knows if like those last few, the Boston years or whatever. I don't know if that dragged down the averages.
The Knicks years.
But, you look at Marbury's game, and you look at, you can look at Iverson's game. A lot of these guys, Ray Allen, Steve Nash, all of these guys were if they played now, they would be even better, I think, with the way that the game is played now. I mean, Marbury is tailor-made, pick and roll, spread out. Let me, drive and kick to shooters, scoring point guard who can handle the ball, be a high volume guy. As good as he was, I almost feel like now he could probably be, put up even, better number. I don't know if his impact on winning would be any different, but his numbers, I think, would be even more outrageous.
I see him. I was watching that Miami Celtics game yesterday, and honestly, I see him as a slightly bigger Kemba Walker.
Yeah.
He's just bigger, a couple inches taller and just a little bit stronger. And I mean, and give Kemba credit too for, because it took him years to get to this point. When he came to the league, he was kind of up and down. He could give you 15 points. Marbury was a little bit more automatic. As soon as he came into the league, he was kind of producing what you expected. Mm-hmm. But I think it's because he walked in with that, 6'2" frame, but solid, strong.
Right. He was muscle.
I agree. If Marbury was playing in the league today, and I think it would be a fit issue. And going back to what we were saying earlier, if he stuck around in Minnesota, I think the story would have been, or even if he stayed in Phoenix, because he had a Stat and Marion there.
Yeah.
And if he stuck around there, I know obviously Phoenix had their years with Nash, and things went well for a few years there. But if he stuck around with that team, I'm pretty sure they would have been and they had a decent coach. They would have been in the playoffs for a few years. I'd bet.
Yeah, well, the one year he was in the playoffs with Amari and Marion, and he hit the game winner in San Antonio. That was a fun series. Yeah, that was like a fun little run he had there.
Yeah, you would expect like they could maybe build off of that, but then I don't know what happened. They came back the next season and they kind of shit the bed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was coaching or just I don't know if there were injuries that they were dealing with. I mean, Stat was also he was coming out of high school. So he was 19, 20 years old also.
Yeah, I remember I was in an English class, and when we were we used to have some kind of magazines that you could take when in the lobby of our high school. And I remember taking one because it had it was like a basketball edition. And I was reading it in the English class one day. And that was the first time I'd heard of Amari Stoudemire. And I went and looked at the back because I want to say Amari's not that much older than us. And I want to say that he was averaging like 40 and 18 in high school. Like I remember going, oh my
40
God.
and 18?
40 and 8. Like look, I had never seen this guy play. I'd never seen a video clip. There was no YouTube to go to. He wasn't like on ESPN all the time. And I remember reading that going, oh my God, this guy's going to be the best player of all time. I haven't seen a clip. And when he was drafted, I remember because nobody had really seen anything outside of like the little vignette that they show, when the player's drafted, and whoever I was watching it with, I remember going, no, you don't understand. This guy Amari is going to be the real deal. Not having any, recognition of why I thought that, other than I read in a magazine that he was scoring 40 points a game in high school.
Well, listen, man. He's 6'10", and he's a freak athlete. Like even for an NBA player, I mean, to be 6'10" and to be as mobile as he was, I don't think the league had seen a guy like that before.
No. And he, talk about playoffs, some of the battles that he had with the Spurs, he was giving Tim Duncan the business.
Oh, yeah.
Like Tim Duncan, arguably, a top 3 defender at his position all time, and he couldn't do anything with Amari in some of the playoff series. But Amari's, it's funny. I actually had been watching some Amari film from he's playing on Maccabi Tel Aviv right now for this past season, and one of the guys in the draft, Denny Avdia, plays on his team. So scouting Denny, outside of the fact that I just love his game and think he's going to be a good pro, it was fun because I got to watch, Amari, all these years later, still from when I first, read about him when I was in high school to now, all these years, I still can watch him. So that's kind of fun.
The greatest player who is ever going to live. I mean, listen, he's a great player too. And had it not been for some injuries and maybe some calls that went the wrong way or that the suspensions in that playoff series with the Spurs, a few things go the Suns' way, maybe 1 or 2 years, and they could easily be champs for a couple of years. Or
100%. I think that they would have won the title that year, the suspension year, if that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I guess hindsight, there's no way to really replay that out.
No way. But in any case, I believe those were Marbury's 2 best chances of really going anywhere, because it wasn't going to happen with the Nets. Would you have Keith Van Horn and Kendall Gill? Well, there were some okay players, but it wasn't going to happen there. And then the Knicks were the Knicks were basically in the same position that they are now, just a disaster with no vision. They're just grasping for straws every year. They paired him with Steve Francis, Penny Hardaway, Zach Randolph, Eddie Curry.
First, shout out Eddie Curry, who is a friend of the show.
I did see that. I did see the promo, the intro promo. Again, and listen, as longtime Knicks fan, I know you're a Bulls guy, but I don't blame any of the players. And I'm not just saying this because Curry is a fan of the show. I don't blame any players for their lack of production or lack of success with the Knicks. this is a franchise that has been in disarray for over 2 decades.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it comes from the top down. And if you're not setting, if you're not, establishing norms and behaviors and expectations for the team and a vision, a clear vision, you're making it almost impossible for players to walk in and do their job.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if, because I feel like a lot of the stuff in New York, was like it always is narrative driven, and they try to scapegoat people, and there's always like, what's it going to take to turn it around? They go for the superstars. Do you think they're going to get out of that kind of thing now that they've kind of hired new management? They got Tibbs. Are they going to build it organically? Because you're already hearing like the trade for Chris Paul rumors.
I think, again, I would never blame it on. The only thing that I would blame on players is if they're not playing hard.
Yeah.
And that to me is, you're a professional. Like, I play hard and I don't get paid. I've never been paid a cent to play basketball. Like, I play hard just because I love the game. So if you're out there getting paid, even if you don't like your teammates, even if the team is dysfunctional, go out there and play hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, that should be a given. So if you go out there and you can tell that guys are quitting on the floor, that's where I'm going to be, a little annoyed with the player. But outside of that, and what they're planning on doing now, if they start, fishing for 35-year-old former stars, not to knock on Chris Paul, like, his performance in the playoffs this year is incredible. But, you can't mortgage your future, which is what they've always done, for some short-term, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, as far as playing hard goes, watching Tibbs coach the Bulls for, many years, if somebody's not playing hard for Tibbs, you won't have to worry about watching them. They'll be riding the pine pony.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm glad that they scooped up Tibbs.
Yeah, me too. I love Tibbs, and I want the Knicks to be good because I have so many friends who have been so disappointed for so long, rooting for the Knicks.
Yeah, listen, I think it's patience. The same thing. Going back to Marbury in Minnesota, if you stick that team out and you put a couple pieces on that, you give it a few years. I mean, look at what's happening in Denver and Miami.
Yeah.
I know Butler just kind of joined the squad, but you need to have patience as a franchise. I really believe that, and you need to let guys, Denver especially, let guys play together for 2, 3, 4 years and see what happens.
Yeah. Build it organically. I mean, even like you said, Butler signed there, but he signed there. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to build organically and then go sign somebody when you're ready.
Right. Fill that last piece in.
Not shoot for the stars and try to get, draft Zion and sign KD and Kyrie. And then when things go south, it's a disappointment. You got to build organically. I think they're doing that. I think RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, whoever they end up drafting this year, I think they'll kind of do things the right way. They have all their picks. So
but I think it's more than that. I think they have to play those guys, let them play on the court. Ntilikina, Knox, RJ, Mitchell, let them foul out. Let them take their lumps. Like, be comfortable with a losing season, but with giving the young guys, like, why would Bobby Portis, who's a veteran, not a bad player, but why would you be giving that guy or minutes? Why would you give him 25 minutes a game?
It makes no sense. You're taking minutes away from the guys that you invested draft picks in.
Yeah.
Even signing Marcus Morris, like, I get it. He netted them another draft pick. He played pretty well or whatever, but like, he's not helping you win games. And if he did help you win a few extra games, all it did is hurt your draft position. So like, did it really? You got an extra pick, but the first pick was probably a few guys late. In this draft, I don't think it really matters from the perspective of, I think the draft flattens out around that area. But either way, those are the short-term moves that don't necessarily make sense. But back to Steph, they go into the whole Olympic fiasco with Team USA. And obviously it's not all Stephon Marbury's fault.
No.
I still look at that team and look, that Argentina team that won the gold that year,
they're pretty good.
they were just pretty good. They were the best in the world. They were quite literally the best in the world.
Literally.
Manu Ginobili, Andres Nocioni, Luis Scola, like they had legit NBA guys. With that said, Team USA had even better guys, and I get it. Young LeBron, young Carmelo, you had guys who didn't necessarily fit, Stephon Marbury, Allen Iverson. Then you had Larry Brown thrown into the mix, and they go into how him and Steph clashed. And, Larry Brown has never been known as a guy who's very easy to play for. And they could have built the team to complement each other, better than they did. However, I still think they should have won the gold medal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think because the documentary was about Steph, it was kind of a convenient plot line. You know what I mean? Like, had they been doing a documentary on Iverson, I'm sure there would be some plot line between – I mean, I know Iverson played for Brown, but, you're playing for your coach that you played for in Philly at one point. He played for Brown, right?
Yeah. He was
and then you go to Olympics, like, you should have this thing in the bag then.
Yeah.
Right? So I think part of it was, like, they had a narrative that they can tell for Steph.
Yeah.
And of course, you're not gonna shoulder too much blame on LeBron and Melo.
They're young
19-year-olds, coming in, and especially I think the country was actually upset with the guys who didn't play that year.
Yeah,
like Kobe sat out. I think Duncan was on that team.
Duncan was on the team. Yeah,
but there was a lot of Shaq. There's a lot of guys who sat out who could have been on that team, who could have really gave Argentina the business, but you're right. I mean, they should have won anyhow.
I mean, it's a good point you make that a lot of the guys sat out. I think those guys thought, like, hey, like, it's Team USA, like, we're the best in the world. When we go to the Olympics, it's a joke. We roll over everybody.
Yeah.
But then at the same time is when, I feel like international basketball starts really picking up as far as, elite players who can come over to the league and play around that time. And I think that it caught everybody off guard, especially I think that if some of those players that you mentioned realized that it actually wasn't going to be a thing where these guys were going to roll over, maybe they would have went and participated.
That's true. That's an interesting point. That but they didn't know. They didn't know that this was the global coming out party for basketball. Like, yeah, we're here now. We're yeah.
It was the kick in the ass Team USA needed to, kind of.
Yeah. I think blaming that on Steph would be crazy, and I would never. It just doesn't make any sense to put the blame on him. I think it was just a confluence of events that just wasn't in the best circumstance for a lot of guys.
And like you mentioned, that kind of the same situation in New York. There was like a bunch of circumstances going on in New York organizationally that, they just weren't ready to build around a player like Steph, and just winning the headline, getting the hometown kid. You could see how things go wrong. And then Steph's dealing with all these things. He's eating Vaseline on YouTube Live and dealing with all these issues that he has. And you could see how that situation in New York can explode. But, one of the things that I'm glad they touched on, and honestly, they kind of breezed over. It was kind of quick. The whole thing with Stephon Marbury making affordable shoes for kids, I thought is an absolutely huge deal.
Yeah.
And that he doesn't get credit for, and that I think, he should. I think when you mention him, it should be one of the first things talked about if you're talking about him in an overall sense, because, for one, a lot of people actually, I remember in high school, a lot of kids actually wore them.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were looked at the same way that now, if you're a kid who goes to high school and you wear, like, Shaquille O'Neal does the same thing with his brand that's sold in Walmart because he wanted it to be affordable. Like, I don't think it was looked at the same way. Stephon Marbury was cool. He was a cool dude, and he made all of these cool things that were affordable. And, we work in high school. We see how it is. Like, that's like a really big thing to allow kids to feel cool going through high school, and not everybody can afford, a 200 pair of Jordans, $200 pair of Jordans, and then if they can't get them because they sold out, they got to go spend $1,200 on StockX for the resale price. Like, so that, that's something I've always really appreciated that Stephon Marbury tried to do.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. That's a great point, man. And I wish there was more of that in the league, and not just more of that, but it should be highlighted more too.
Yeah.
And I know that company went under like a few years later. Like, and I don't know, maybe they were just pricing it too low.
Yeah.
But it would have been great if someone could have come in and, I don't know, put some influx of cash, save that shoe, or come up with some kind of system. Maybe make them like $30, instead of, because even $30 for a pair of basketball shoes named after your favorite player or an NBA player, that's still pretty cheap. Like compared to a $200 pair of Jordans, that's still a pretty good deal. I think it was an incredible move. It just didn't work out long term, and that's kind of my only issue with it. I would have liked to have seen it extend, and like turn that into a thing where NBA players, again, it's not there. You don't want to put that expectation on them, like that they have to do that.
Yeah,
that's not their job, But
yeah, I mean, it's something he should get credit for. And then finally, the last thing, and I'm glad they mentioned it, and it's not like a secret. He really had a second act in China and turned his career around, and kind of not his career, but the perspective of what his career was like. I mean, he went there. I think everybody kind of takes him a little bit more seriously now than they did towards the end of his NBA career. And he went on, had a lot of success. He embraced the culture. They embraced him back. A kid from Coney Island was able to turn himself into a superstar in another country. I think that's, a pretty incredible, story.
Well, he had a lot left in the gas tank basketball wise. Yeah. I mean, he left the league when he was like, 31 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
He wasn't old.
No.
LeBron's, 4 or 5 years older than that already.
Yeah.
So the dude could still play. And I mean, I know it was, they talk about the death of his father kind of precipitated his league exit. I mean, on top of the New York Knicks fiasco, like everything that was going down there. But man, China saved him. And I think the fact that he couldn't speak the language and that it was a totally different culture, the only language for him was basketball again.
Yeah.
Which is what which was what was pure to him, from the start. So he didn't have to listen to the noise, to all the busyness, all the criticism, the blame. It was just go out and hoop, and these people love you.
Yeah.
So then, like, the game becomes fun again. The game becomes something that he can kind of own, and obviously he has the talent to back that up.
Yeah.
And then, dude, he's a national treasure over there.
Like you said, it's kind of like you're a kid again. You're playing it for, obviously he's making money there, but like he could have made money in America if he just stuck it out and bounced around a little bit more. He fell in love with the game the way you do when, we were in high school playing, on a hoop outside of your house,
mm-hmm.
And that's what is great about it. And like you said, the only language he knew was basketball. It's another thing. Like, you don't need to speak the same language as somebody else when you're playing basketball. That's the language. You know what to do. You know how to tell somebody to set a screen and make it fun. You don't have to tell them directly. You know what to do. And sometimes you don't even have to say anything. It could be a look. And, that's kind of the beautiful thing. I think it's cool that, that's how he ended his career.
Yeah, and I'm genuinely happy. I mean, you want the best for these guys. Like, maybe at times you get upset and you villainize a guy who's on the team that you love. You want to, screw this guy. He should have brought us a chance, whatever. But, they're people. They're human beings. And I think nothing better proves that than that final scene in the barbershop, man, where he's talking to the kid.
Yep.
I didn't cry, but I got choked up a little bit.
You get choked up.
And he, he's talking to the kid, and he tells the kid, he's like, you know, you don't have to be a basketball player. He's like, you could be the president of the United States. And the kid's just like dumbfounded. And he's like, what? Nobody ever told you that? He's like, no, nobody ever, you know.
Yeah. And that's stories like Stephon Marbury's, which he may not have won a championship in the NBA, but he is still successful, and he found success through basketball. And, you know, sometimes, a lot of times, these documentaries are, you know, just to pump up the player. They didn't go into like, they went into some of his darknesses, but they didn't go into a lot of the details of the stuff, you know, like the sexual harassment stuff with the Knicks.
Right.
Stuff out. But at the end of the day, his career was successful, and he's a kid from Coney Island who literally made it to the other side of the world and made an impact, and is still making an impact in his community. So it's, you know, it's cool. It's a cool film.
He's got a legacy. And last thing for me, man, I love the way that, just some kudos to the filmmakers, the way they structured this, man, where for the first half of the film, we really don't even hear from Marbury.
No,
you know, it's his family, it's his boys from his neighborhood, it's other guys who played with him, and then so it's like you're hearing from everybody else, you know, about this guy, and then slowly they sprinkle in like little pieces of Marbury, and then finally it ends on him, you know, really. And even in China, you start to see, you get to, you know, into his hotel room and stuff, you get a more personal, like, all right, here's the guy. Yeah. This is really the guy, you know, and he's going to have a legacy, you know, in the basketball world. I don't know. Do you think he'll be a Hall of Famer?
Probably not. I mean, I'd have to look to see exactly like how many All-Star games he made. You know, I think not winning the gold medal hurts, because a lot of time international success is weighed to where it's like, if you win a gold medal, you probably have a pretty decent chance of getting in if you're like a multi-time All-Star or whatever else. Yeah. I'd have to see a lot of his other accolades. He probably won't. But you know what? It's the Basketball Hall of Fame. So they might look at his career in China, and he might get in based on that.
Well, he's a champ. He's a champ there.
Yeah. So he's coaching. So, you know, he might get in for sure. Do you, before we get out of here, is there anything that, you know, you want to plug that you've been working on?
Nothing complete, man. I appreciate that, but maybe in the future I'll have something of my own that I can push forward.
All right.
I appreciate that.
Love that. All right, guys. That's it. It's another episode. Thank you, Fote, for coming on. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to talk about this. It made me feel like we were in middle school again. Some of the stuff we talked about. So make sure that you guys, you like it, you subscribe, you leave a comment, share it out. That's going to be it. We'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, peace, guys.